Podcasts and podcast episodes can actually be directly a part of the different funnels associated with your business. A conversion podcast is one of the lesser used business podcast blueprints because it's a little bit challenging to get up and running and make run really effectively. But to define it, a conversion podcast is a show where the most important thing it does, or the most effective thing it does, is change the people who consume it from one type of relationship with you to another. And that might mean going from stranger to subscriber, or non-buying client to buying client, or non-community member to community member. But usually some part of the podcast or some aspect of the podcast is gated in some way. Podcast episodes might be private behind a paywall where people pay to listen to them. Or you could have extra access to you as the host or your guest, or additional information or additional episodes behind an email pay gate or behind a payment gate. And these can be really effective when typically you've got a lower dollar value offer. Like, this is not a high ticket sales tool. But if you have a podcast where, for example, you're talking about all of the great things that you do in your paid membership community, and you're talking about the extra bonus interviews with your guests that members of your community have, then listening to that podcast episode kind of becomes a step in the sales process for your community. So if you're thinking about ways to enhance these systems that you've already got in place around growing your community, selling your lower ticket items, like communities, memberships, ebooks, guides, things like that, your podcast can be part of the funnel that you are using to do it. And in some cases, a podcast is a conversion podcast if it is a pay to listen to podcast or a private show where people are going to, before they get anything, are going to have to pay you or become a member of your community in some way. And there's lots of different tools available to do that. And it's really important to think about whether or not that is going to be the most valuable use of your podcast for your business. Sometimes it is, but sometimes you might get more mileage out of focusing on building relationships or engaging an audience for a maybe slightly further away but higher ticket sale. Want even more podcasting advice? You can get a free copy of my book, Podcasting for Business: How to Create a Show That Makes a Bottom Line Difference for Your Company, at podcastingforbusiness.com. That's podcastingforbusiness.com, and it's completely free.